husband served me divorce papers because I traveled to my dying mother's bedside instead of attending my stepdaughter Astra's 6-month wedding anniversary celebration. I've been married to my husband, Nil, 45, for 3 years, though we dated for 2 years before getting married. He has a daughter, Gabriela, 24, from his previous marriage. When Nil and I started dating, Gabriela was in college. While we weren't super close, we didn't have a bad relationship either. She'd come home during school breaks, we'd have family dinners, and everything seemed fine between us. No drama, no tension, just normal, polite interactions. Gabriela lost her mother when she was 16. Nil's ex-wife passed away suddenly, and I've always been very conscious of not overstepping in her life. I didn't want her try to make her feel like I was trying to replace her mom. So instead of acting like a stepmom, I tried to be more of a friendly presence in her life, especially since she was already an adult when I came into Nil's life. Nil has always been very protective of Gabriela, and I understand that. She's been through a lot, losing her mother at such a young age. Over the years, I've seen how much he prioritizes her. Whether it's dropping everything to help her move apartments, spending hours on the phone if she's stressed, or making sure she has what she needs during important events, like finals or job changes. Honestly, I thought he was a great dad because he was there for her way more than some parents who barely pay child support and call it a day. 6 months ago, Gabriela got married to her college sweetheart, Brian. It was a beautiful wedding, and I was genuinely happy for her. I helped out a lot with the planning, offering to assist wherever needed. I didn't want to overdo it, but I also wanted to show her that I cared and that I was there for her. At the wedding, she actually hugged me and told me she was happy her dad had found someone who cared about their family. That moment meant a lot to me because I thought she was accepting me into the family and that things would be good from then on. But after the wedding, things took a turn for the worse. Gabriela became more distant. She started canceling plans we'd made or just ignoring my texts. When we did see each other, she barely spoke to me. So I stopped trying, as after a while it was hard not to feel hurt. Nil didn't seem to notice, or if he did, he didn't say anything. Whenever I brought it up, he told me to be patient and excused her behavior by saying Gabriela had been through a lot in her life. Then, a month ago, Gabriela announced that she and Brian were planning a 6-month wedding anniversary celebration. Not 6 years, 6 months. She planned a small, intimate family dinner to celebrate their special bond. I thought it was a little odd because you don't hear of people celebrating 6 months of marriage every day. And it wasn't even on their actual anniversary date. Instead, it was scheduled for a weekend, which I figured was just to make it more convenient for everyone. But I kept my opinion to myself because everyone's free to celebrate whatever they want. Nil, of course, was completely on board because he'd do anything to make Gabriela happy. 3 days ago, I got a call from my brother with terrible news. Our mother had suffered a massive stroke. The doctors weren't optimistic about her chances. My mom lives in California, while we're in Massachusetts, so it wasn't like I could just pop over to see her. I have a very close relationship with my mother. She raised me and my siblings as a single mom, working multiple jobs to make sure we had a good life. She's been there for me through thick and thin, and now there was a real possibility of losing her. I knew I had to go see her as soon as possible. I immediately booked the first flight I could find to California. For me, my mother came first, especially in this state, and knowing it could be the last time I saw her. This, of course, meant I would miss Gabriela's celebration. I tried to explain the situation to both Nil and Gabriela. I told them about my mother's condition, how serious it was, and that I needed to go. I thought any normal person would understand, but Gabriela was furious. She'd been cold to me for months, and now she was angry that I was going to see my dying mother. Nil, on the other hand, seemed torn. I could tell he didn't want to take sides, but then he said something that left me speechless. You should really think about your priorities. And I was thinking about my priorities. My mother's life was ending, and they were upset over a 6-month anniversary dinner. I packed my bags, got on the plane, and flew out that same afternoon. When I arrived at the hospital, my mom was barely conscious. I held her hand, told her how much I loved her, and stayed by her side all night. She passed away early the next morning, which gave me at least some sense of closure. It was a heartbreaking moment for me, but I'm so grateful I was there with her in her final moments. Wouldn't change it for the world. I got to say goodbye. That's more than most kids get. The day after the funeral, I flew back home, completely drained, both physically and emotionally. I had barely slept and was still trying to process the fact that my mother was gone. When I walked through the door, Nil was waiting for me. He didn't hug me or ask how I was. Instead, he handed me divorce papers. He told me that since I didn't prioritize his family, he wasn't going to prioritize me as his partner. He said Gabriela was the most important thing to him and he needed to be with someone who supported that. He even told me, Gabriela needs stability and support, and you've shown you can't provide that. My mother had just died, and now my husband was divorcing me over a stupid 6-month celebration. Had the circumstances been different, I would have attended. I never said I wouldn't go. But I think the situation warranted missing it. Besides, her dad was there, and that should be the most important thing. These past months, she's been rather distant with me, so it's not like she needed me there. It all felt surreal. But Nil didn't stop there. He went on about how I'd always been distant with Gabriela and how this was just the last straw. He even brought up things I barely remembered, like the time I forgot to text Gabriela happy birthday, even though I had called her and sent a gift. He said, "You never truly accepted Gabriela as part of my life." Which felt completely unfair. I did so much to build a relationship with her. I helped plan her wedding, listened to her vent about work, and even acted as a mediator when she and Brian had a huge fight early in their marriage. Now I'm sitting in a hotel room because Nil asked me to give him space. My mother is gone, my marriage is apparently over. I don't regret the choice I made, because I chose to be with my dying mother. If that cost me a marriage, so be it. This marriage didn't seem right for me anyway. Before continuing, don't forget to subscribe. New stories every day. Update 1. The overwhelming majority have agreed that the marriage wasn't worth it and that my husband should have been more understanding. Some even said he should have joined me on the trip to see my mom, because my stepdaughter could have celebrated at 7 or 8 months. So thank you for the support. A lot of people asked for more details, so I want to fill in some of the gaps and give you an update on what's been happening. I've connected with my brother and a few close friends, who have been amazing. My brother even flew out to stay with me, and it's good to have a familiar face around. We've spent hours reminiscing about Mom, how she always made time for us even when she was working multiple jobs, and how she was an amazing mom who loved us. It's made me realize just how much she shaped the person I am. I miss her more than words can say, but I'm determined to honor her memory the best way I can. Unfortunately, the situation with Nil and Gabriela has only gotten worse. Gabriela has been bad-mouthing me, and Nil seems to be going along with it. I haven't spoken to them directly, but I don't have to because I can find out this stuff anyway. After hearing this, I decided to consult with a lawyer. When I explained the situation, she was shocked. She said, "Nil's behavior, especially handing you divorce papers so quickly, shows signs of emotional manipulation." She even suggested that the divorce papers could have been premeditated, which honestly hurt deeply. But at least I'm taking steps to protect myself now. She's helping me make sure my assets are secure and that I get a fair settlement. Thankfully, we live in a state where marital property is divided equitably, so that gives me some relief. She also advised me to document anything I receive from them, or anything I find that is in electronic or paper form. What really opened my eyes was something my friend showed me. She had screenshots of Gabriela's social media posts from the past few months, posts I was unaware of. There were several passive-aggressive posts about stepmothers. Turns out, Gabriela had blocked me from seeing certain posts, so I had no idea all this was going on. The posts started right after her wedding, which explains the sudden shift in her behavior towards me. The worst one, she wrote something about how her mother would be rolling over in her grave if she knew what kind of person her dad had married. That one stung, because I never tried to replace her or overstep in any way. There were also comments from her friends and even Nil that seemed to support what she was saying. What makes it even worse is Nil's response when I pointed out the posts to him. He said I was looking for an excuse and accused me of being toxic for looking at the posts in the first place. The thing is, I wasn't the one who looked for the posts. My friend showed them to me because she was genuinely worried about what was being said. But to Nil, it didn't matter. He's so focused on defending Gabriela. Then there's something my lawyer pointed out that really stuck with me. The timing of it all. Gabriela's party had been planned for weeks. But those divorce papers were drawn up way too quickly after I left for California. Way too quickly. It's hard not to wonder if all of this was already brewing before this even happened. Were Nil and Gabriela talking about pushing me out behind my back? But when I think about how everything has unfolded, the party, Gabriela's posts, Nil's sudden coldness, I don't think it's a coincidence. I guess they were planning something at the party, but my trip was the perfect excuse. My brother's still here with me, and he and the memory of my mom are what's getting me through all this. As for my marriage, Nil was looking for an excuse to divorce me, so it's time to give it to him and be done with all of this. Not that I want to stay married to him after all this, but it still shocks me how little tact he had to do this after my mother's death. Update 2. A few days ago, I received an email from Brian, Gabriela's husband, which I wasn't expecting since we're not close, and I don't think I even have his number. But what matters is its content. Brian apologized for not reaching out sooner and explained a few things that are important to everything that's been happening. He told me that Gabriela has been dealing with unresolved grief over her mother's death, and apparently, her wedding brought a lot of those emotions to the surface. Although she's been going to therapy, instead of working through her feelings, she's projected them onto me. Up to this point, I don't think he has told me anything new, some details, but I think by and large there are many things that I already knew or had intuited. But most importantly, according to Brian, Gabriela had planned the party and was planning to make things difficult for me at it. She wanted to create last-minute drama to see my reaction, like a sort of loyalty test to her family. According to Brian, Gabriela believed that if I didn't pass that test, it would confirm her theory that stepmothers are always the bad guys. In the end, she didn't even have to test that, which was to ask me at the last minute to take care of the food, either buying or cooking it, because of some disaster with the caterer. But my mother's death had given her the perfect excuse. Brian also shared some things about Nil that make the situation even bigger. Apparently, Brian has been urging Gabriela to delve deeper into her issues in therapy, but Nil has been undermining those efforts. Instead of encouraging Gabriela to take responsibility for her feelings, Nil has been validating her fears about abandonment, reinforcing the idea that I'm a bad stepmother. Nil told Brian that it was easier to blame me than to make Gabriela take responsibility because he didn't want to upset her. This feels even more Machiavellian to me. My relationship with Gabriela wasn't best friend material, but it was pretty good for a stepmom and stepdaughter. But Nil has been making things worse just because it was easier for him. Nil wasn't just passive in this situation. He actively chose to protect Gabriela at my expense, even when it meant destroying our marriage. After reading Brian's email, I immediately forwarded it to my lawyer. She told me it's a significant piece of evidence, especially since it shows that Gabriela's actions were deliberate and that Nil was complicit. She believes this could strengthen my case for a faster divorce, and maybe even protect me from any financial claims Nil tries to make. Following your advice, I've also started looking into therapy for myself. After everything I've been through, I know I need help processing all of this. Between losing my mom, the collapse of my marriage, and now discovering Gabriela's manipulations, it's been too much. I've found a few therapists in my area, and I'm hoping to start sessions soon. This isn't a situation I can solve on my own, or over a beer with a friend. I need professional help. It's also not one of those things where I can find an innocent person and blame them. I don't think that will fix things. I don't think it's doing Gabriela any good, and it definitely didn't do our marriage any good. In the meantime, I've moved out of the hotel and into a small temporary apartment, because living in a hotel wasn't good for my wallet. Plus, this is starting to look more like a new beginning, because at least it's more homey than a hotel room. My brother's still here, and I'm more grateful than he can imagine. He's helped me furnish the apartment, unpack, and even hang pictures to make it feel like a home. He's also been there emotionally, always willing to listen when I need to vent or sort out my feelings. He even offered to stay with me if I ever feel lonely. Honestly, I don't know how I'd be handling all this without him. To protect my mental health, I've made some tough, but necessary, decisions. I've blocked Nil and Gabriela on social media, and I've asked mutual friends not to give me updates on them. In the email, Brian also talked about his relationship with his wife and how difficult it has been for him these months, especially these last few weeks, because Gabriela seems to have regressed. He was aware of some of Gabriela's problems due to the loss of her mother, but lately, Nil has only made it worse. I believe that it was my husband who put me as the enemy. I don't know what's going on in Nil's head right now, but it's definitely not right, and he's dragging his daughter into all of this. At least those are Brian's concerns, and I don't think he's that wrong. Update 3. The last few days have brought me a lot of clarity. Nil finally reached out, but not to apologize. Instead, he wanted to negotiate. It seems he's realized that filing for divorce so quickly, especially while I was grieving my mother, wasn't a smart move. My lawyer explained that his behavior during this whole mess could make him look really bad in court. I think Nil is trying to avoid the embarrassment and legal ramifications of his impulsiveness. He's now eager to settle everything quietly and quickly. And while I've agreed to discuss it, I've made it clear that my well-being comes first. Separately, Gabriela's therapist reached out to me, with Gabriela's full permission, of course. She wanted to explain a few things, which honestly, gave me a lot of perspective. Apparently, Gabriela's unresolved grief over her mother hit her hard around the time of her wedding. The therapist said, Gabriela has been dealing with feelings of abandonment and guilt for years, but instead of working through them, she channeled them into resentment toward you. I also learned that the therapist had cautioned Gabriela against having the 6-month anniversary party, recognizing it as an unhealthy way to cope with her emotions. But Nil, as always, went along with it to avoid upsetting Gabriela. While this context doesn't excuse Gabriela's behavior, it helps me understand why she acted the way she did. It's sad, honestly, because it seems like she's trapped in a cycle of grief and misdirected anger, and Nil has been enabling it. Instead of helping her truly heal, after some back and forth, I decided to accept Nil's settlement offer, but only under specific conditions. My lawyer has ensured the terms are fair, not just financially but also to give me a clean break. I'll be keeping my personal assets along with compensation for the emotional distress and disruption this situation has caused me. Most importantly, I've insisted on a complete separation. No contact with Nil or Gabriela, no social media ties, and no lingering connections that could pull me back into their toxic dynamic. My lawyer is finalizing the paperwork, and I'm hopeful this chapter will be closed soon. A few members of Nil's family have reached out, and their reactions have been mixed. The most surprising was his sister, who called to tell me how shocked and disappointed she was by Nil's behavior. She even told me this isn't the first time Nil's permissiveness with Gabriela has caused problems. Apparently, his late wife had similar concerns about their relationship before she passed away. It made me realize this wasn't something I could have fixed, no matter how hard I tried. Their unhealthy dynamic existed long before I came on the scene. The biggest surprise, however, was Brian, Gabriela's husband. He reached out and asked to meet for coffee, saying he has some things to share about Nil's behavioral patterns that he thinks I should know for the divorce. I agreed, but only with my lawyer present to ensure that anything he shares can be properly documented and used if needed. I'm still a bit apprehensive about what Brian wants to say, but his willingness to talk to me gives me hope that someone in Gabriela's life is trying to help her make healthier choices. Update 4. This might be my last update, as long as nothing happens that leads me to write a new one. I've spoken with Brian, as well as Gabriela, and my divorce is finalized. I think this part of my life is closed, and I, too, want to close this chapter of telling it on Reddit. But before I go, I need to tell you a few things. The divorce, for being the simplest thing, comes first. Everything has been signed, and according to my lawyer, it has been more than fair. A fair separation of assets and with financial compensation. In return, I cannot talk about our divorce openly to protect my ex's reputation. However, since I have used other names, as is usually recommended here, my lawyer has told me that I can tell it here. Mainly, because there are some slightly changed details so that it would not be admissible in a trial. More on this later. I met with Brian, and while he didn't give me much more evidence for the divorce, nothing we could use for a better settlement, he did tell me some things about him and Gabriela. They are also going through a divorce, but it's not finalized yet. Brian believes his wife is a very damaged person, and he's done what he can to help her. But Nil has made it very difficult, to the point that he has decided to step aside. According to him, the divorce is being carried out amicably. And although Gabriela doesn't agree with the divorce, she understands it. Brian believes that she seems to be understanding the problems she has, but that the divorce is still going ahead because she has only done so after reaching this situation. He hopes she gets help and resolves all her problems, because even though their marriage can't work right now, he still loves her. I asked him if he could agree to stay with her while she works on her problems, since he still loves her. But he said he's already been through this and doesn't want to be disappointed again. Seems fair to me. Lastly, I received an email from Gabriela, since I had her blocked. An apology and an explanation, in addition to other issues related to her father. She offered me an apology, which has extended to a social media post, which I had to check if it was true. And it was. She told me that lately, it has been very difficult for her, something I already knew from her therapist, and that she owed me an apology. She explained that her father has been largely responsible for directing her feelings toward me. Although she has also admitted that part of it is her fault, and that is why she wanted to tell me how sorry she is. She also said she's very sorry that I lost my mother, which she knows all too well, and that whole mix of feelings has made her that kind of person lately. She told me about Brian, and said she was sad, but that she understood and wanted the best for him. She said that she was going to take her recovery very seriously, and that included distancing herself from her father because he was the source of her not getting better. She also offered to meet to talk, if I needed her to apologize in person. To which I replied that it wasn't necessary, that I forgave her. She also apologized for ruining my marriage. But in my response, I replied that it wasn't her fault, and that Nil just needed an excuse to leave me, instead of doing it the way she and Brian were handling things. She also confessed that Nil had the papers practically ready to be delivered, and it only took a call for the lawyer to give them the final touch when I traveled to see my mother. She had a conversation with her father after my divorce was finalized, and she knows the kind of arrangement we reached where I can't talk about my divorce. But she told me that it seemed unfair to her, and that if I couldn't talk about it, she could. So, 2 days after this email, she made the post apologizing to me, clarifying what happened, and talking about Nil. So, regardless of whether or not someone can recognize Nil through this post, everyone who matters knows the truth. I haven't heard from Nil, though I did get a few messages from people who hadn't contacted me before just to show their support. Finally, I told Gabriela that I'm glad she's making her mental health a priority. I don't hold any anger toward her, and I think under different circumstances, with a better husband and father than Nil, we could have had a really good relationship. And that would be all. I think it clarifies many things for me and leaves me reassured knowing that my problem wasn't as a stepmom. To you, I only have words of gratitude for all the support provided.